Hello, everybody. Welcome to the AP Lit video session. Happy Monday. We're glad you're with us today. I'm Susan Barber from Atlanta, Georgia, Grady High School. And look who's back with us today. My co-teacher, Bear, has decided to join class today. With me is Mr. Escobar, and when I hand it over to him, I want to ask him, this is how we do roll call in my class every Monday. I say, instead of saying here, I want you to tell me something good that happened this weekend. So Mr. Escobar, what's something good that happened this weekend?
Oh, something good. Well, my wife grows sunflowers with her AP Bio students, and they grow them from seed, and normally they learn about plant biology, I guess, right? And then they do labs at the end of the year with the flowers. But this year, we have a backyard full of sunflowers and no students to do labs with. So she had a Zoom meeting with her students and they voted on what to do with the sunflowers. So some of them were taken to our high school where the cafeteria workers are still working because they're distributing food to the community. And the other half of the sunflowers went to a local hospital here in Miami for the healthcare workers. So that's what they decided to do. So that was something good that we were able to participate in.
I love it.
There you go. So I am Mr. Escobar from Miami, Felix Varela Senior High School. And when we first started these videos, we talked about establishing a learning community. And I that was certainly an aspiration. That was a goal of mine and of Ms. Barber's, but we are just so overwhelmed by what the response has been. This map shows just some of the correspondences that we've received from teachers, including some very funny messages and memes from high school students. And what surprises me the most, and Miss Barber's a pro with social media, so this probably won't surprise her, but we've hit every corner of the United States, but when we zoom out, we've also received correspondence from, I already shared Bolivia with you guys, but we also received some correspondence from a high school in China. So we are definitely very global. And thank you again for all the messages from Skyview High School and that high school in China and all over the United States. We're missing Europe. Ms. Barber, I think that they do take AP Lit in Europe. I hope that I hope that in France and España, they're listening to us and they're learning or they're reviewing with us what the riches of AP English literature have in store. So we love hearing from you guys. Keep sending those emails. We're trying to respond to them as quickly as we can, even though Ms. Barber and I are probably receiving more than we can handle right now. But that's a great problem to have. Those are certainly heartwarming problems to have.
So let's review what we talked about last time. And we had asked you to look at this prompt, the 2018 prompt. And I'll cut right to the prompt. Either from your own reading or the list below, choose a work of fiction in which a character holds an ideal view of the world. Then, in a well-written essay, analyze how the author's portrayal of this idealism and its positive or negative consequences contribute to an interpretation of the work as a whole. And so we had asked you to write an essay or maybe just establish your line of reasoning. And there's no way that we can go over that, but let's quickly review what should be the components of your essay. So you would start with a solid thesis that address the prompt. And we had talked about your thesis is what is going to drive your argument, propel your argument forward. And from that, you will have body paragraphs that are centered around claims or insights into the text and how they fit the prompt. Now, each claim there should be a progression among the claims in which your argument builds. So you're not just arguing the same thing over and over, but there's going to be an order, a logical order to your argument and to your claims. Next, each claim should be supported with evidence from the text. And this applies to Q1, Q2, or Q3 or whatever paper you're writing. You are going to have specific evidence that supports your claim. Now, not all of your evidence in your body paragraphs are going to be the same because you'll have different evidence to support the different claims that you have. And then finally, in your paragraphs, you'll have the analysis or the explanation of the evidence. Why is this evidence important? What does it mean? What does it say about the claim? And then finally, how does it connect back to the thesis? So you should have been able to see in your essay this order and this line of reasoning and all of these components in your body paragraphs. Now, today we are going to start working on question 2, the prose analysis. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about characterization and specific details, what they reveal about the character's perspective, and the character's motive. Every time an author is giving us a detail about a character, it's not because they're having to meet a word count like you might have had experience with in your college essay. They're not like, oh, I've got to write 10 more words. All of those details matter because they tell us things about the characters. So you'll see this can be broken down into 3 different parts, and we'll look at each of these. Descriptions, dialogue, and behavior. These reveal things about the character. Remember the very top of the iceberg that we talked about. And then we also find out about characters through their agency, or if another way to think about that is what motivates them to act. Why are they acting this way or saying these things? What propels them to do the things they're doing? And finally, the character's choices, what they decide to do and how they respond to conflict. It reveals what they value. So as we think about today's lesson, we just want to think about all of these things, all of these details about characters. And what they do is they show us this range of values, beliefs, assumptions, biases, and cultural norms of the characters. The details are the way into learning about the characters. And that's what today's lesson is going to focus on.
Absolutely. And the end result is not just an analysis of that character, but how that character functions and fits in within their society, right? So it ultimately leads us to this conversation of what is it that they value, what is it that they deem important. That's where we want to land on as we explore the characters that we meet in the text. When we first open a book and we encounter characters, they're these flat, one-dimensional creatures. We don't know anything about them. I always find, for example, in a Shakespearean play, that those first few lines, if you don't know anything about the story, you're so confused. Who's speaking? Who are they? And you have to keep flipping back to that, list of characters in the front of the play because you need some context for who they are. But then we start asking ourselves, okay, who are they? And what do they do? What are their actions? And once we start determining what each of these characters are doing, their actions begin to give life to them. And we begin to see them as not quite entirely fully human yet, but definitely they stop becoming stick figures. And then we look at what they say. Now we have a character on the page who has done certain things and who has said certain things. And all of a sudden that stick figure starts to become slightly more three-dimensional. And when we start to recognize this 3D figure, they eventually ought to, especially if we're talking about works of literary merit, they should crawl out of the page, right? I feel like Hamlet lives with me. I feel like he's a friend. He's someone I know. He's someone I understand because he's not this static character. He's Harold Bloom would argue that he's more human than some humans, but these characters definitely crawl out of the page. And then when we start looking at their perspective, what is it? As you mentioned, the agency. What are they doing, and why are they doing those things? as soon as we give them these features, they become real people. So this person who initially was the stick figure, once we see what they do and what they say, they become an actual person. And here's a picture of a nurse we know, and this is our tribute to all the healthcare
Yes.
professionals who are definitely going above and beyond. Um, but you know, when you look at a healthcare professional, this is a real human being who is choosing to get up every day and going into the hospital and assisting these people, obviously putting their own health and that of their families at risk. That's not a static character, and that's our goal. I always tell students, you need to understand the characters on that page as if they were your brother and sister, your mother and father. Once you understand that they are real people, or at least representatives of real people, and that's the key, right? These are all microcosms of society at large. Then you're going to understand what motivates them, what moves them, and you're going to be able to delve deeply into your analysis. But to be able to analyze characters, to be able to speak, you know, walk the walk and talk the talk, we need vocabulary. And so often it happens to us, it happens to adults, it happens to teachers, and it certainly happens to students, where the right word is at the tip of your tongue, or it's right there, but you don't remember. And as soon as someone says it, you're like, yes, that's the word I was thinking of. Well, you know, it's because we don't have this character vocabulary readily at our disposal. So here's a handout which I've modified, and this is sort of like a Frankenstein handout. It probably started with probably Miss Deborah Shepard at some consultant training, but either way, this is the result of many minds at work. I would take a picture of this. I would definitely take a picture of this, students, and start looking at words. And it's not time for you to learn new words necessarily, but you know a lot of these words. They're just not readily at your disposal. But when you're reading, if you have recalled these words, then you're going to be able to describe the characters. So go ahead, take a picture of
And
this and review it.
and if
Yeah.
I can interrupt, this PDF is included under the description of today's video. So we have that for you there.
Perfect. Right. Yes. Right on the YouTube, look underneath, right? Um, and we've divided it here into 4 components. We're not just looking, you know, I love the iceberg example that we talked about maybe 3 videos ago. You know, one thing is those physical qualities, that bottom left quadrant of my screen. And that's usually what we turn to. We can recognize if a character is young or old, tall or short, but what about the mental, moral, and social qualities of that character, which quite frankly are a lot more interesting than the physical qualities normally. So this is vocabulary that I think we have to have at our disposal, because eventually we want to organize our reading and our thinking into these charts. Ms. Barber and I were having a conversation just a few minutes prior the live um, lesson about this transition from paper pencil test to now having a prompt on the screen, and you're all so accustomed to annotating right on the text. Well, you may have to turn to some of these charts, and we're going to talk about that in future lessons, where you might need some sort of graphic organizer to do just that, organize your ideas and organize your notes, which will then inform your essay. So for this practice chart, we would put the character's name at the top, a trait, which you could easily get from this handout here, and then the evidence. And we're talking about the textual evidence. Now, remember, this is only step 1, because if you haven't figured it out yet, we always land at function. So it's not just who is this character, you know, it's not just Hester Prynne is a woman who is carrying a baby. That description is fine, but what is Hawthorne's purpose for giving us this character within the Scarlet Letter, which matters most? We're going to use for this guided practice George Eliot's Middlemarch, which is such an easy read, right, Miss Barber? I suggest everyone pick this up and reads it in about half an hour after this lesson. But it, you know, it's a great text, because if you are concerned about older text and you know, figuring out the syntax patterns and the vocabulary, well, this will give you great practice for that. So we're going to use this. We're going to use Middlemarch. And this was actually the 2011 question, but I'm not giving you the prompt and I'm not even giving you the entire passage. We're just giving you a brief sample of the text so that we can look at this idea of characterization. Ms. Barber, you'd like for me to read? You want to read?
You want to split it up?
Sure.
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead.
Rosamond colored deeply. Have you not asked Papa for money? She said as soon as she could speak. No, then I must ask him, she said, releasing her hands from Lydgate and rising to stand at 2 yards distance from him. No, Rosie, said Lydgate decisively. It is too late for that. The inventory will be begun tomorrow. Remember, it is a mere security. It will make no difference. It is a temporary affair. I insist upon it that your father shall not know unless I choose to tell him, added Lydgate with a more premonitory emphasis.
This certainly was unkind, but Rosamond had thrown him back an evil expectation as to what she would do in the way of quiet, steady disobedience. The unkindness seemed unpardonable to her. She was not given to weeping and disliked it, but now her chin and lips began to tremble and the tears welled up. Perhaps it was not possible for Lydgate, under the double stress of outward material difficulty and of his own proud resistance to humiliating consequences, to imagine fully what this sudden trial was to a young creature who had known nothing but indulgence, and whose dreams had all been of new indulgence, more exactly to her taste. But he did wish to spare her as much as he could, and her tears cut him to the heart. He could not speak again immediately, but Rosamond did not go on sobbing. She tried to conquer her agitation and wiped away her tears, continuing to look before her at the mantelpiece.
I love this passage.
Yeah, it's
so
a great
much.
Passage, right? Yeah.
And
so
what
here
a great
we have
character study.
Oh, absolutely. And both of them, right? And
Yes.
the dynamic between the characters. We have a couple who are having financial difficulty, and the husband has decided to essentially pawn some of their things, and Rosie is just not having it. She's not dealing well with this, and she wants to ask Papa for money, right? And Lydgate says, absolutely not. We're not going to do this. We're going to be fine. She starts crying. That melts his heart. And well, you have to read the whole 2011 question to find out what happens, or read Middlemarch. Like I said, you could get that done in about half an hour. But our focus today is about characterization. So we decided to go ahead and do some highlightings, do some textual annotation here. And I want you to look for a second. Let me just pause for 5 seconds and see if you can figure out why we have done the colors as we have. I'll tell you that the easiest one to figure out is probably this. I don't know my colors. Teal, maybe greenish blue, dolphin's color, maybe. Here we have dialogue, right? And we go back to, how do we know about characters? We know characters because of what they say, what others say about them, what they do, and what the narrator chooses to share with us. So here in this color, we have things that she has said herself. In green, we have highlighted the things that she does. She releases her hand. She stands 2 yards distance from her husband. Her chin and lips begin to tremble, so on and so forth. And in yellow, we have the details that the narrator has shared with us. And look, there's no right and wrong where it comes to annotation. You might see things that we didn't point out. We perhaps saw other things that we chose not to highlight because it gets too crowded. The idea is to have a system for your note taking. And again, if you're going to do this on the computer and you don't have the exam in front of you and you're taking notes, look, you might have these 3 categories. If this year's prompt is about characterization of some sort, then you may want to have a section on your notes for the things that they say, the things that they do, and the things that the narrator shares with us, and you start jotting things down, even if it's just line numbers. We're going to work quickly here. But ultimately, for these things to make sense, we have to go back to our chart, okay? And all we've done is we've taken, here we annotated the text, right? Then we take that annotated text and we convert it to the chart. It's just to organize our ideas. And again, what the character says, what the character does, and what the narrator reveals, and we put in our evidence. But what's missing? This isn't the end all. It's not about us recognizing the character of Rosamund and what she does and what's the end result. If you recall our purpose all the way at the beginning of this video, it's to get at the values of this society. So we're going to modify this chart now, and we're going to do this. We're going to select a trait for Rosamund, right? It might be that she is maybe insecure, maybe she's concerned, maybe she's selfish, maybe she's spoiled, maybe she's worried. Manipulative. Oh, that looking at the mantelpiece is definitely on purpose, right? She knows what's happening here. And then you're going to place the textual evidence. But look at the commentary, and we put it in bold for a reason. What do we learn about the values, beliefs, assumptions, biases, and cultural norms represented by Rosamund? When you get to that answer, you're getting to the heart of the passage. You're getting to that golden nugget. You're getting to what, honestly, what the development committee is wanting you to discuss, right? Which is not just a description of the character, but how is it that through this character, we understand society, and in turn, we understand George Eliot's purpose for writing Middlemarch, or at least the purpose for this excerpt, right? Perhaps not the entire novel. So let's go over what we've talked about today. Okay, we're talking about characterization. And what are the things we need to remember, Ms. Barber?
So remember, we're looking at what the character does, what the character says, what are the specific textual details that the author has given us about the character. How are they described physically, emotionally, psychologically? And we have that great chart that can help steer you in that. If you can't find the right word, then think about their background, the below the water things that we don't see, like what's going on that we don't see that contributes to what they're doing. And finally, this whole piece of agency. So why are they acting this way? What is motivating them? What's propelling them to act either against the conflicts, react out against it, or submit to it? Why? We want to get to the why. It's not enough, like Mr. Escobar said, it's not enough to just identify things, but we have to take it the next step. Why is that important? So today we're hoping that what you'll walk away from this lesson with is a way that you can just jot down and organize these ideas and these traits about a character. What do they say? What are they doing? How does the author describe them? And then give some specific text evidence. And then, most importantly, think about what that means. What do we learn about the character through these specific textual references?
And if we focus on just the physical aspects, we're going to be left with having not much to say, right? Because most of what Eliot is giving us is so subtle. Maybe it's not subtle, but it's definitely not physical, right? It's a lot more of her mental, moral, and social qualities that we're getting than any of the physical qualities. I mean, we know that she's a woman. and we know that she's standing, right? But there's not much more. But if we go to the mental strategies, could she be clever here, right? Could she be precocious, maybe? Could she be cunning? Could she be I don't know, what else can you pull from? I think those might work, right? Depending on how we're reading this. And for the moral one, is she idealistic,
Self-centered.
self-centered? Yeah. Inconsiderate might be good as well, right? I don't know if deceitful is right for this passage. It might be too much, but there's definitely some manipulation going on, right? But these are so much more interesting than the physical ones for this particular passage.
So tonight we're going to have you do this with another passage, and this is from the 2009 prompt, The Street. I love this prompt, and this is attached below as well in a PDF. But we're going to ask you to look at this passage and think about the character of Ludi Johnson and do the same thing that we did with today's passage. Find the different adjectives that describe Ludi Johnson. What's the text that you use to get to that adjective? And then, most importantly, what do we learn about Ludi Johnson's character based off of the text evidence? So we're going to ask you to think about that, to work on that tonight. And then tomorrow, you'll have the heads up because we're going to be using this prompt in tomorrow's lesson on setting as well. And you'll be able to see how those two things really fit together nicely. And we're not just looking, I sound like I'm from Atlanta. We're not just looking at, the goal is not just to pull out a character or pull out the setting, but it's how do all of these things piece together and work together.
Yeah, I'm afraid that perhaps some of the students who try to write this tonight will fail to see the connection between what we did today and this specific homework assignment. Perhaps we should read it, and I think it'll help students realize something that you and I saw rather quickly, right?
Okay.
As we read it, I want you all out there to focus on when and where we first meet Ludi Johnson and exactly how much we are told about her, because that is critical. If we fail to see this character, how could we possibly write about her? So let's begin. There was a cold November wind blowing through 116th Street. It rattled the tops of garbage cans, sucked window shades out through the top of opened windows, and set them flapping back against the windows. And it drove most of the people off the street in the block between 7th and 8th Avenues, except for a few hurried pedestrians who bent double in an effort to offer the least possible exposed surface to its violent assault. Now, Ms. Barber, do you see Ludi Johnson there at all?
I was just about to ask that. No.
Where is
Ludi
she?
Exactly.
Right.
You want me to pick up here?
Go ahead.
It found every scrap of paper along the street. Theater throwaways, announcements of dances and lodge meetings, the heavy wax paper that loaves of bread had been wrapped in, the thinner wax paper that had enclosed sandwiches, old envelopes, newspapers. Fingering its way along the curb, the wind set the bits of paper to dancing high in the air so that a barrage of paper swirled into the faces of the people on the street. It even took time to rush into the doorways and areaways and find chicken bones and pork chop bones and push them to the curb.
We must be crazy to ask students to write about characters when we haven't even, what if she's not even in this passage, right? We got to keep reading, but definitely in what you just read, I didn't see Miss Johnson, and it's definitely about the setting, but not about a character. I'm very confused right now. It did everything it could, the wind, that is, it did everything it could to discourage the people walking along the street. It found all the dirt and dust and grime on the sidewalk and lifted it up so that the dirt got into their noses, making it difficult to breathe. The dust got into their eyes and blinded them. and the grit stung their skins. It wrapped newspaper around their feet, entangling them until the people cursed deep in their throats, stamped their feet, kicked at the paper. The wind blew it back again and again until they were forced to stoop and dislodge the paper with their hands. And then the wind grabbed their hats, pried their scarves from around their necks, stuck its fingers inside their coat collars, blew their coats away from their bodies. No Ludi Johnson.
But now we have a shift. Here we go. The wind lifted Ludi Johnson's hair away from the back of her neck so that she felt suddenly naked and bald, for her hair had been resting softly and warmly against her skin. She shivered as the cold fingers of the wind touched the back of her neck, explored the sides of her head. It even blew her eyelashes away from her eyes so that her eyeballs were bathed in a rush of coldness, and she had to blink in order to read the words on the sign swing back and forth over her head.
So we do have Ludi Johnson in the text. And what we also learn is that Ludi Johnson is one of the people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to those, and this is a hint for the students, if we go back to the first 3 paragraphs, they have been talking, or the narrator has been telling us about the conditions and the efforts and the actions of the people on the street. And if Miss Johnson is one of them, then every time that the speaker spoke about people
Mm-hmm.
in the first 3 paragraphs, we can assume that that's what Miss Johnson was dealing with as well. Each time she thought she had the sign in focus, the wind pushed it away from her so that she wasn't certain whether it said 3 rooms or 2 rooms. If it was 3, why, she would go in and ask to see it. But if it said 2, why, there wasn't any point. Even with the wind twisting the sign away from her, she could see that it had been there for a long time because its original coat of white paint was streaked with rust, where years of rain and snow had finally eaten the paint off down to the metal, and the metal had slowly rusted, making a dark red stain like blood.
Yeah, and now in this paragraph, we really are seeing some evidence that really tells us about her, where you can really dig into not just assumptions about how she was earlier on the street, but now why is she acting this way?
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah, we get
3.
to agency, right? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It was 3 rooms. The wind held it still for an instant in front of her and then swept it away until it was standing at an impossible angle on the rod that suspended it from the building. She read it rapidly. 3 rooms, steam heat, parquet floors, respectable tenants, reasonable.
Well, I like that we're ending with that word. I think it's reasonable for us to give this passage to students and tell them, go write about characterization. Listen, we're talking about the AP English Literature exam. We don't expect for the College Board to present us with something that's obvious, evident, on the surface. We know that we're going to have to dig. We know that we're going to have to put all of our skills and all of these lessons into action in order to succeed on this examination. So here's a prompt that you would think is not about characterization. It's clearly one that's about setting, but there is a character there, but we have to dig. We have to be persistent. And we have to dig, and perhaps we have to reread. Once you recognize that Ludi Johnson is there, you need to go back to the beginning and see that we were talking about her all along. She is a representative of those people who are on the street despite the circumstances. And I don't want to say too much about setting because that's what we're going to deal with tomorrow. But again, for tonight, you're not writing the essay, you're simply completing this chart. We're very interested in what you have to provide as your commentary. And again, use the chart that or the table with all the adjectives that's posted underneath the YouTube description so that you can get to all those adjectives if you're getting stuck with finding the right ones for Miss Johnson.
So if you know somebody who does not have access to the internet or a device, please get this information to them, and College Board is going to do the best they can to make sure everyone has access access for the exam. So once again, it is always a privilege for us to spend this time with you, and we hope that you have a great rest of the day. We're looking forward to you digging into this prompt and talking about it more tomorrow.
Bye, folks. Take care.
See you later.